The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk, one of the longest running television talk shows in the city of New York. We're in our 17th year. We welcome your comments tonight, so please join the dialogue by calling 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, many New Yorkers were upset at how the city of New York handled the Christmas weekend snowstorm, as many streets in the outer boroughs, including the Bronx, were not plowed for days and days. Also, the usually snowstorm reliable buses and subways left many Bronxites stranded. So tonight we brought in the chair of the City Council's Sanitation and Transportation Committees to try and sort out what happened, what didn't happen, what should have happened, and what might or might not happen in the future. It's highly unusual that we'd have a guest back on the show after only a few weeks, but these extenuating circumstances demanded it. So welcome back to BronxTalk. It was only a couple of weeks ago that you were here last. The chair of the Council's Transportation Committee, Jimmy Vacca, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And also on the telephone from Brooklyn, the chair of the Sanitation Committee, Councilmember Letitia James. Councilmember James, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. This is my first time on, so thank you.
Well, you have a long way to go to catch up with my new co-host, James Vacca.
I see that you're co-host.
Let's start with you, Councilmember Vacca. You had a meeting with the mayor. It was somewhat publicized,
Yes.
in I guess in a diner here in the Bronx.
Yes.
Where else to conduct business?
Right.
How did that come about, and how did it go?
Well, he wanted to come and meet with me, and he wanted to get my take on how the snow removal went, and he wanted to update me on what they were doing. He did update me, and he did get my take. I was not happy, and I explained to the mayor that in all the years of my involvement, this was the worst. The snow removal efforts were totally unacceptable. They left many of us stranded for days. And I asked the mayor to make sure that an investigation was conducted so that we find out what really happened and why, and what are we going to do in the future to make sure it never happens again.
Was he apologetic? Was he conciliatory? Do you think he listened? Was he like, oh, goodness gracious, this Bronx guy is opening his mouth up?
No, he listened. He listened. I think he expected me to react the way I reacted because I had been on record for many days, so he certainly knew how I felt. And I do think that at this point in time, by the time he came to see me, I think he realized that something had gone drastically wrong.
Mm-hmm. Do you get the sense that he has a handle on what went wrong, or he has an idea of what went wrong, or he's even willing to look in the mirror? I think a lot of people feel like, gee whiz, this mayor doesn't generally do those kinds of things. Do you think this was a different case?
I don't know. We didn't get into how he personally felt. I do think that he's going to have to look at how the city conducted itself. We went for days without being shoveled out. In fact, the mayor spoke about tertiary streets to me. He said to me, primary streets, secondary streets, and tertiary streets. Now, tertiary streets get the last priority, but I said to him, Mike, tertiary streets are taxpayer streets. We have to rename them taxpayer streets. That's where we live. We live on the tertiary streets, and we waited 4 days for a plow. Certainly in Brooklyn and Queens, it appears to have been even worse. That's unacceptable. We never had this before, and I've been around for blizzards, hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever. This has never happened before.
Did you call him Mike? You said Mike. Did you call him Mike?
I think I did.
And the last thing, and we're going to go to Councilmember James in a moment. I had heard somebody had posted on Facebook that he referred to you as the councilman from the South Bronx. Is that accurate?
Well,
I know you're not the councilman from the South Bronx, but did he refer to you that way?
No, not to my knowledge. I understand that it was on TV. Someone on TV said that. But I'm proud to speak for the borough, so it doesn't matter to me where they say I am.
Do you think he knew what part of the borough that you represent?
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to clear that up. Councilmember James, from your perspective, and I realize there are hearings to come and further investigations, what do you think happened here?
Well, the mayor, he didn't have breakfast with me, or he didn't even meet with me. He didn't have the decency to do that. But I've never been a friend of the mayor of the city of New York, and have been highly critical of him on a number of issues, including when I investigated city time, which unfortunately resulted in a private company stealing over $8 million, taxpayer dollars. And then on this issue, I was highly critical of him.
I think we're getting some feedback here. We're getting some interference, so I guess we'll have to get that cleared up and get back to you, council member. Jane, should we go right back to her, or? All right, council member, don't hang up. Is she with us? Let's. Okay, we'll get the council member back. Let's talk about the MTA and the buses and subways. I talked about it at the beginning of the show that there were usually reliable buses and subways in when a snowstorm happens. Why weren't they reliable this time? In fact, when the snow came down, I even said to myself, well, people will still be able to move around the city because the trains always seem to run during snowstorms. Well, not this time.
The MTA also fell down on the job and fell down significantly. Buses without chains. Didn't we all think that buses had chains? Didn't we all think that the MTA would probably not have put on the streets the articulated buses? The articulated buses are what many people see as double-decker buses. Mm-hmm. Those double-decker buses are not what you put on the streets when you have 20 inches of snow. You put on the smaller buses that can more easily navigate turns and snow conditions. And you put on those small buses chains that will make sure that they get to where they have to go. And this was not the case. We have buses that never came in the Bronx, buses hours late, people walking, desperate to get to work. The MTA has a lot of explaining to do, and my transportation committee is going to have a separate, dedicated hearing strictly to why the trains and buses were not running.
You know, there may be some more complex issues about the nature of the subways and then the diesel cars, and there's been a lot of dialogue about that, but something as simple as putting the chains on buses and making a decision that and I think we could all understand how having those articulated buses, that frankly sway through the streets anyway, would not be appropriate. Why do you think that happened? Is it a lack of leadership? Is it somebody who didn't know that this is how we do things?
There are many people questioning, did the MTA implement Plan 1 or Plan 5? And when was Plan 1 agreed to? And when
describe for the viewers what that means.
Plan 1 is basically a plan where there's minimal snow expected. Plan 5 is where you have large amounts of snow, and the MTA kept changing their mind in the hours before the storm, and therefore they went with a minimal plan where in reality they should have gone with a more serious plan based on what the snow estimates were very clearly predicting.
There has been some dialogue about the idea of whether or not there was to be a big snowstorm. In fact, I communicated with somebody today who kind of bollocks the idea of whether or not he should go to his plane flight out, and they weren't really sure. I had the sense before this particular snowstorm that we knew that there was going to be a big snowstorm.
I had the absolute sense that we were going to get hit big. I don't know where anyone would have thought differently. I thought that the weather forecast was quite clear for some time that this was going to be a big storm. Now, is there a good time for a storm? No, never. This storm was December 26th, the day after Christmas. Some people say school was not in session. We were lucky. Yes, but on the other hand, you had people with Christmas family, friends from out of town. You had other situations that were extenuating. So there's never a good time for a storm like this. But New York City always has to be prepared for an emergency. And at every level, MTA, transit, City of New York, we were not prepared. I told the mayor that very, very clearly. I'm very proud he came to my district and that he thought to come and get my take on it. But I gave him my take.
Which brings us back to Councilmember James, who I understand that we have back with us. You were talking about the fact that you had not supported the mayor or criticized him in the past, Councilmember Vacca is saying, well, he came to my district. Should your support in the past be a reason that he would or would not or should not come to you in this case? After all, you are the chair of the Sanitation Committee.
You would think that he would schedule a meeting with me just as a matter of protocol to sit down and get my take and my feelings on the situation. The reality is that there's a number of theories, and we lost the storm, and we are down in man and person power in the Department of Sanitation. The Department of Sanitation currently has 5,800. It is true that Commissioner Doherty and the president of the union, Harry Nespoli, went to the Deputy Mayor Goldsmith and had asked for additional staff. That request was rejected. This was not recently, but in September. The union president at that time indicated that in order to deal with some of these, to deal with the snow removal in the city of New York and to do an effective job, they needed at least 6,400 people. Now, assuming that you can say that we can do more with less, and I understand that that's the mantra in the city of New York, and assuming that you did not factor into that number the 1,000 senior managers that we have, one can argue, we can deal with snow with 5,400. Some municipalities have much less. For me, the issue was, why did we not declare emergency? Why did we not declare an emergency, a snow emergency, just as other jurisdictions did? New Jersey declared a snow emergency. Delaware declared a snow emergency, and other jurisdictions along the eastern seaboard.
Why do you think that, just like you weren't here, but at the moment that I asked Jimmy Vacca the same question about the MTA, like why did they make some very obvious missteps? Why do you think they didn't? Do you think if they did, it would all of a sudden require resources that they weren't, the city wasn't prepared to provide?
No, the snow emergency is not only for individuals to get their cars off the street. Well, a number of cars were stuck. People were out. They were shopping. They were visiting. They were the holiday, whatever. A snow emergency basically says that you have to get your car off the street, and certain streets are snow emergency streets, and the Department of Sanitation uses those streets to dump snow. And in addition to that, you rev up, you put chains on the tires, you put plows on some of the Department of Sanitation trucks, you call in staff at an early hour, start deploying individuals based on the forecast of the snow. None of that was done.
So why do you think it wasn't done, though? I mean, maybe this is something that's going to have to be asked when we have or when you conduct hearings. But the things that you're saying, the things that Jimmy Vacca is saying, seem logical. Do you have a sense of why that didn't happen? Was the mayor not engaged? Were they trying to save money? I mean, what's your sense?
For a period of time, and Deputy Mayor Goldsmith was in Washington, D.C. And I do not believe that Commissioner Doherty, he's a great public servant. I don't believe he was making decisions on a day-to-day. Clearly, the Deputy Mayor of Operations, Deputy Mayor Goldsmith, who apparently was reinventing the Department of Sanitation, missed the ball and unfortunately did not declare a snow emergency. And also, rumor has it is that the Commissioner of Transportation, Commissioner Sadiq Khan, apparently opposed declaring a snow emergency. We will get to the bottom of it on January 10th at 11 o'clock at Immigrant Savings Bank on Chambers Street.
There are a number of rumors out there that there was a slowdown of some sort, and I saw further discussion of that on the news before I came in tonight, that there were sections of the city where workers were doing some kind of informal, wildcat strike or job action. Do you put credence into that?
I believe, again, on January 1 of this year, there was 100 senior members, managers, who were scheduled to be demoted. 100 of them. They would lose seniority and they would lose salary. clearly the morale within the Department of Sanitation, particularly amongst managers, was low. So do I believe that there was an organized effort to engage in a wildcat strike? No. Do I believe that some members, senior managers were upset about the fact that they would be losing their jobs? Yes. Just imagine, just human nature being what it is. You know that in 3 days you're going to lose your job, but yet they're calling you to work, and they expect you to go above and beyond your normal duty because of the nature of the storm. Wouldn't you be a little peeved?
Well, you would be, but I think for me, if I was a public servant, I might put that service, especially considering the seriousness of the situation, ahead of that issue, and not hold the people of New York hostage because of a dispute.
And I agree with you, and I'm not condoning it.
I mean, it's easy for me to say that, of course.
I'm not condoning it, but I do know that a few of them were very, very angry and basically allegedly wanted to show the mayor of the city of New York who was in charge.
All right, well, let me ask you this, and I'm going to ask Councilmember Vacca the same question. The implications of budget cuts, because there are cuts not only in sanitation, but in other agencies as well, including police and including fire. Certainly, Councilmember Vacca has been fighting closing of firehouses throughout his district as well. If this can happen in the Department of Sanitation, is it a reasonable question for the people of the city of New York to say, if you cut back in the same way, if you eliminate supervisors or managers in some of those other agencies, could we have an emergency if, God forbid, we have another sort of, whether it be a fire emergency or a terror emergency or some other action where a full department is needed?
I know, because, again, this was just an isolated few who basically put their interest above the safety and the interest of New Yorkers. I think they represent a very few members who are senior managers within the Department of Sanitation. Mm-hmm. The large majority of the line staff and the supervisors in the Department of Sanitation did an excellent job. I think they were at a disadvantage, one, because of the holiday. I know that they were called late. The equipment was not snow ready. There was not a snow emergency. You had all of these cars on the street that got stranded.
Yeah, let me extend my...
And because there's limited... And because the private plow trucks, unfortunately, were called on...
I understand your response. Let me just extend my question one step further, and that is, are you concerned that budget cuts will affect the safety of the city of New York if this, and I'm talking about with simply not having enough personnel, if this is what happened with the Department of Sanitation when it comes to the fire department or police department?
Well, obviously, I'm very much concerned. I'm very much concerned about the 20 firehouses that may close, particularly during the evening hours. I'm very much opposed to that and will fight tooth and nail, particularly since members of FDNY came to my assistance when my mother was dying. Mm-hmm. I would fight for them until to the end of the earth. I know right now NYPD is a sacred cow, mm-hmm.
Even though
there might be some attrition. But I'm concerned about municipal workers overall. I'm concerned about all the people who are losing their jobs who respond to child abuse cases. Mm-hmm. In light of Nick's Mary Brown. I'm just concerned about all of these municipal layoffs, and I believe that Deputy Mayor Goldsmith is being penny-wise and pound-foolish and putting the lives of New Yorkers in danger, particularly since, again, and Councilmember Vacca is going to have a hearing on this, a number of people were trapped in subways.
Right. Let me just interrupt and ask Jimmy Vacca the same question. Are you concerned that this type of budget cut could affect other agencies and, of course, then the safety of New Yorkers?
I have to say that I'm worried about the future of our capacity to meet the needs of our people. I think the budget cuts coming down are serious. I think if we face further state cuts and federal cuts because of the lack of money from the federal government, I will be fighting, I know, and my colleagues, for what I consider life support services for the elderly, for children. Firehouses, very high on my list, And now sanitation.
But-
I don't know if this is a wake-up call or not. I think time will tell.
You know, it's easy to say no budget cuts. On the other hand, of course, we don't have any money, and
Yep.
certainly we'll see what the new governor does, but there will be shrinking money coming from Albany.
Yeah.
Can we balance the budget and keep New Yorkers safe at the same time?
That's
or is
the-
it the
that's-
nature?
that's
We'll
where-
start with Jimmy
well,
and then Letitia will get
That's
to
where
you.
we need guidance from the administration. They have to make recommendations to the council. Some of those recommendations we've rejected in the past, and we will probably reject in the future. Tish mentioned the firehouse closures. I've been a leader in that, and we've kept the firehouses open. I don't see how we close firehouses and tell people that you are safe in your community. Police, I have to tell you, we are down 7,000 police officers from 2001, and that does worry me. 7,000 less officers means our streets are not as safe, and I do think when you review crime stats for 2010, you will see crime beginning to creep up. That's not what we want.
Letitia James, you respond to that, and then I want to take a couple of quick phone calls. Go
I
ahead.
just want to say this, that I think we need to put everything on the table, including a millionaire's tax. As a member of a progressive caucus, I believe that we should really be considering taxing the rich in the city of New York. Wall Street has had record profits. It's about time that the rich pay their fair share. I mean, we impose a progressive...
And you think that could, thank you very much on that could help balance the budget.
Yeah, individuals making over $250,000 or $500,000, I mean, they're being taxed the same level as working class people. Come on.
Let's go to the telephone. Mark from Pelham Parkway. Mark, I know you're long-winded usually, but I'm going to ask you to be brief because we're running out of time. Go ahead.
Well, I got to make a good statement, and I got a good question for Jimmy and the other council person, Ms. James. First of all, I think what happened in the city is deplorable. Number two, why do we always run around going, we have to fix it for the next time? We didn't learn our lesson from John Lindsay in '69, over 40 years ago, and it's happened before in the 70s. There's nothing to fix. Everybody walks around with blinders on their eyes. John Lew has said it the best. We are losing our middle class, our taxpayers. This is an arrogant mayor who doesn't care about the Bronx and the outer boroughs. He proved it by trying to isolate it and saying,
Well,
okay,
let
here goes my
me
question.
say this, Mark.
Let him ask his question and then... go ahead.
Mark, let me say this. I resent being called part of an outer borough. We are part of the city of New York. We are no different than the people in Manhattan, who I think many of whom got good snow removal. I don't know why we're called outer. We are part of the city, and we've got to get rid of that terminology.
Okay, Mark, ask your question.
His
Go ahead.
block was shoveled, and Doherty's block was shoveled,
Okay.
and one block away from where the sanitation commissioner...
Mark,
didn't
ask
even
your
get
question real
so
quick.
my only question is this. If you're going to hold hearings, and keep in mind, when they were talking about raising the fares, when the mayor came to the South Bronx, and he was standing next to Jay Walter, they both smirked when he said...
Mark, are you going to ask a question?
Yes, my question is this. If you find that there is, and there's going to be lawsuits out of this because people died, my question is, what power will you invoke to hold the mayor and the deputy mayor responsible? Can you fire him? Can you get rid of him? Can we do a recall?
Okay,
What punishment can we give for this deplorable service?
Got it. Let's ask Ms. James that. Let's say that there is something that really is wrong. What do you have any authority? Do you have any power? What do you expect that you would be doing if you really uncover something that's disturbing?
Well, it depends upon the evidence that we uncover. So, no, we do not have the power to terminate the commissioners. But what we do have is the power of the bully pulpit. We have the power of legislation. We have the power to really make a difference in the city of New York. Understand that this hearing will be watched by millions. Every network will be there. I would imagine every city council member will be there. A number of borough presidents have already contacted me. A lot of politicians have already contacted me. So everyone wants to come to this hearing.
So it's going to be difficult to hide, I guess, is what you're saying. Let's bring Bob from Riverdale and the Bronx News on. Bob, how are you?
Okay. Good evening, Gary. Good evening, council members.
Hi.
It was funny that the Post had the story about the sanitation work, which is Bloomberg paper, really.
Good. Ask the question, Bob. Go ahead.
Okay. The MTA and the city share resources in case of emergency. New York City has a war room, or what's known as a bunker, that takes over in emergencies. One of my sources said that there was a new deputy mayor in charge who did not know what to do, as deputy mayors routinely run the city.
What's your question, Bob? Go to it.
Who was in charge when the snow started to fall, and who was in charge of the bunker giving the orders?
Got it. Thank you. Your sense,
I don't
Jim
know
Vacca?
about a bunker. I do think that Commissioner Doherty was in charge, but I'm sure that he was taking direction from City Hall, or he was in touch with City Hall on the operation. I agree with my colleague Tish James. The state of emergency should have been declared immediately. If this is not a state, if this storm did not represent a state of emergency, very much else does. And I don't understand the hesitancy in proclaiming that. But John Doherty's been around a long time. I think highly of him. I think that's going to be part of our oversight hearings. Who did what and when, and how were decisions made?
Councilmember James, back to the question of resources and manpower. There's been a lot of talk, especially with the new Deputy Mayor Goldsmith, that part of what's going on here is an attempt to privatize many of the services of the City of New York, including a lot of the services of sanitation. Do you think what went wrong here is in part because of that?
Yes. The mayor of the City of New York is basically anti-union and would love to bust the backs of unions. He has done it consistently, and there's enough evidence to prove that, in fact, he would like to privatize the city. Based upon what was uncovered as a result of city time, again, a contract which started at $63 million, which ultimately expanded to almost $800 million, and then only to uncover that the four contracting agencies, four private contractors, stole $80 million from taxpayers. And then again, John Liu came out with another private contract today, again, where there was perhaps where an audit he's ordering an audit on a contract where the costs have ballooned again.
We're running out of time, but I do want to thank you, Councilmember James, for joining us all the way from Brooklyn. You're always welcome in the Bronx, as always, and we appreciate your time this evening. Plenty to talk about, and maybe after the hearings we can have you back and do a meltdown on what happened. Meltdown is a good word to use.
Literally.
Thank you. And Jim Vacca, you'll be back with us next week, huh?
I'd love to come back again and again and again. It's great to be here. You know, I got mostly from taxpayers. What is our tax dollar going for if we can't get good safety net services like snow removal, transit police, fire access to our block?
This is what
that's the bottom line. We pay enough. We should have basic city services at all times.
Thank you for joining us. And again, Councilmember James, thank you. If you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of our program are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar, and you can see all our previous shows. Now in its 17th year, one of the longest-running weekly TV talk shows in New York City. Of course, Monday nights at 9 here on BronxNet's Channel 67, Verizon Fios 33. Thanks to producer Jane Folloro, our director tonight, and our cast of thousands all around us here in the studio. And to you, Mr. Vacca, and Councilmember James, and to you, good night.
Thank you.